Let's sit nice and tall and close the eyes. Hi. Hello. And we'll just take these few moments to breathe in and out. Allow yourself to settle into your seat. Allow yourself to settle into the breath. Allow your heart to open with humility and a sense of deep love. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in the invocatory mantras. If you know them, please join. Taking a breath in. Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om Ganana Antva Ganapati Gom Hava Mahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jestarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anashrinvanuti Bisidhasadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajibhirvajinivati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Divo Bruhataf Parvatada Saraswati Ajata Kantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Kritachi Shagman Novacha Mushati Shrinotu Vagdevyai Namaha. And gently releasing the hands down and fluttering the eyes open. Thank you all so much for being here this morning for another conversation on spirituality and life and all that good stuff. And all the difficult stuff too. We don't shy away from that, you know. Sorrow and suffering are important aspects of life. And in one way of looking at them, which is probably the more challenging way, they are actually gifts, sorrow and suffering. Because if we didn't have sorrow and suffering, we would not be able to recognize joy. We would not be able to recognize enjoyment. We would not be able to recognize the goodness if we didn't have something to contrast it with. If you walked into this room and it was painted only this purple color, and everything in the world was painted only this purple color. I had a friend growing up, and her name was Diana. And her saying, because you know how like teenagers have like sayings, right? Her saying was, the world is turning orange. I think maybe it was a message at that point in time, I'm not sure. But anyway, the world is turning orange. And she would say that about everything. The world is turning orange. Well, just imagine that the world is turning this purple color. And eventually the world is nothing but this purple color. The trees are this purple color. The sky is this purple color. The buildings are this purple color. People are this purple color. Everything is this purple color. There is no variation whatsoever. How do you know if you like this color or not? Your memory of other colors has gone away. How do you know? In your human experience, how do you know whether you like this color or not? You have nothing to compare it to. Our human experience is very, very much based in the play of the opposites. The purple versus the reds and pinks, and blues and greens and whites and browns and golds and yellows. Our human experience is very much based on the play of the opposites. But we suffer from a condition called entanglement. Oh, isn't that a great word? Entanglement. Because when we're in the midst of the suffering versus the joy, the sorrow versus the happiness, the human joy and happiness, which of course is a bit different than the next level up, which is the joy and happiness of the innermost self. When we're entangled in the play between these things, in our humanness, we become so ultimately entangled. We're like the person sitting in the chair bound by ropes. You ever see that on like spy shows and stuff? You know, person sitting in a chair and they're tied up, their hands are tied, their ankles are tied, you know. Yeah. And even their mouth is gagged. Right? You ever see, like in those shows, right? They gag their mouth. Well, when we're in the midst of this entanglement, our mouths are also gagged. In a way, where sacred vibration is no longer being spoken, only the more guttural, primal reaction to the entanglement is being spoken. Does that make sense? So we run around reacting, as we've talked about many, many times before. We run around in reaction, and the reaction brings forward words that are harsh and violent, words that are based in great dissatisfaction, words that are hopeless, words that are harmful on many, many different levels. And because we become then entangled in those words, that very human language, whatever it happens to be you speak, the English, the French, the German, the human-made languages, we're a bit gagged, and we forget that we're capable of a much higher language. The language of divinity, the language of love, the language of disentanglement. We use the word attachment and non-attachment a lot in the spiritual world when we're talking about the teachings of the scriptures. But entanglement is actually perhaps a more approachable word to use. Am I entangled in this? Or am I doing the work of detangling, of getting myself free from that which binds me? Is this all making sense so far? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Good. So I would talk about a few of the things that are necessary for us to move away from the entanglement of the play between sorrow and joy and suffering and happiness and attachment to the material world, to move away from that entanglement and toward a more profound, honest, truthful, open relationship with the way the world is that you yourself have created. So that you can reflect more profoundly and with less blame, more honestly with yourself, with less shame, and more intentionally and with less expectation that things should be different. It starts with humility, and humility is quashed by egotistical pride. The egotistical pride doesn't have to be the size of like Napoleon's ego. Right? It doesn't have to be that huge. Egotistical pride is very tricky because it can start off like this, a little tiny little thing, A tiny little voice in the back of the mind that says, yeah, but you know what? You deserve better. Yeah, but you know what? You're more than them. Yeah, but you know what? You're less than them. Yeah, but you know what? This little voice in the back of the head that gives you the yeah, but you know what? And then we listen to that. The little voice grows up a little bit more because we listen to it. It gets a little bolder. And it starts to say things like, it's not your fault. None of it is your fault. You're absolutely not at fault here. Starts to say things like, everybody else is at fault. You're just the victim. You can't help it. It's not your responsibility. And then because we listen to that little voice that just got bigger, it gets even bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually becomes quite narcissistic in every single one of us. And we get all these catchphrases in society, and right now I think narcissism is a really big catchphrase. And so we look around at the people we know and we say, oh, that one's narcissistic. Oh, yeah, and that one over there, that one's narcissistic. And we should be saying, right here, there's narcissism. Right here, there's narcissism. Those people and the narcissism that they're dealing with in their own heart and mind is their problem. The narcissism that I walk through this life with is my issue. That's what I have to address. I need to address my own narcissism, my own prideful ego, my own anger, my own hatred, my own whatever quality it happens to be that's drawing me into a state of lack of humiliation. And by humiliation, I don't mean beating myself up. I mean humbleness. Being humble. Accepting responsibility for my own self requires the cultivation of a humble nature. The quashing of the inner narcissist requires humility. Because I don't know about you, but have you ever met a narcissist who's humble? Like really humble? No. They're opposites, right? So the quashing of the inner narcissist requires the cultivation of a humble nature. The quashing of the inner hater requires the cultivation of love. The quashing of the innermost impatience requires the cultivation of patient generosity, of space holding, of realizing that everything I see doesn't belong to me. Everything I experience doesn't necessarily belong to me. Only the things that that's interesting. There's another way to say that. Your problems don't belong to me. Your challenges don't belong to me. Your path doesn't belong to me. What does belong to me is the behavior that I take part in that tries to become an obstacle on your path, or tries to push you along it, which is also an obstacle. What does belong to me is my own behavior, my own thoughts, my own words, and my own behavior. That belongs to me. But your thoughts, your words, and your behavior belong to you. So whatever world you have created for yourself is yours. The world I have created for myself is of my own making. And therein lies the work. Understanding that. And then committing oneself to the work of detanglement. Detanglement. Difficult to say. Great word, though. Because the entanglement doesn't just occur in the world that I make for myself. It occurs between our worlds. Me reaching into your world and you reaching into mine in ways that are unhealthy or harmful. That also creates entanglement. So to lessen the entanglement, we have to step back and say to ourselves, what is it that I have ownership over here? What is it that I am creating? Why am I creating it? What is the purpose of what I'm creating? Is it to solidify the entanglement and the suffering and the chasing after some kind of happiness? Or is it something more? And to be able to honestly answer those questions for ourselves, we have to cultivate humility. We have to allow ourselves humiliation. And again, I know that's such a bad word in our society, right? We think humiliation, well, they humiliated me. No. That's your ego saying, they said something I'm completely uncomfortable with, and I'm not even going to bother looking to see if there's any truth to it. I'm just going to be wounded. If I came to you in your yoga practice, and you're in downward dog, and your hands are like this, and I corrected you, would you be offended? No. Some would. It's true. But Cindy wouldn't.
Because you were teaching me to do it the proper way.
So how many times do people approach us with corrections or suggestions or saying things like, what you said really hurt me? And we take offense to it because we're not willing to receive that suggestion or correction. What's the difference between me and that other person? Not much. Not really. Not when you get to the heart of it. We all have light inside of us. We're all divine. We're all the mother talking, right? We're all the mother trying to come through. Yeah, she's got a lot of egos to work through, though. A lot of that inner narcissism. We got to move that out of the way and pave the path with humility. And then her voice becomes really clear. And then when a person comes up to us and says, you know what, that really hurt my feelings, we don't say, what are you talking about? I would never hurt your feelings. You're obviously going through something again. We wouldn't be so defensive. Instead, we would say, can you share with me exactly what it was that I said or did so that I can take a look at it and see if it's something I actually own? Is it my dog that bit you? If it is, let me correct this. Let me take responsibility. Are they my words that hurt you? If so, let me tame my words. Let me not let them run loose in the streets to harm others. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the cultivation of humility. And one of the questions that students often ask is, well, how do I start cultivating humility? And there's a lot of different ways you can do it. The first way is to acknowledge that, humility is generally lacking. And then we say, no, I've been practicing yoga for a long time. Humility isn't lacking here. I've learned all about it. Like, learning about it is not embodying it. It's just not the same thing. They're very clear in the teachings about that. Book knowledge, 0. Action, embodiment, 100. Do the embodiment, right? You can study the books all you want, but if you don't embody the teachings, it means nothing. It's just another tchotchke sitting up on the shelf that needs to be dusted every once in a while. Yeah. So we have to embody the humility. How do we embody the humility? No, it's not by becoming a doormat. Not in any way, shape, or form. It's actually by becoming an analyst, an observer, a purposeful witness, someone who is actively watching. We cultivate humility by stepping out of the role of fixer, judge, jury, executioner, saint, sinner, whatever identification we happen to have made for ourselves, by stepping back from that role and watching, paying attention on purpose. And many of you have heard me use that phrase many, many times. Paying attention on purpose. Someone walks up to you and says, what you said hurt my feelings. You stop and you consider, how do I respond to this? Not react. And then you cultivate a peaceful answer within yourself, a peaceful response, as best you can. Well, what if it's somebody who's always telling me I'm wrong? Well, first of all, are they the same statement? And this is the other thing, jumping to conclusions. You hurt my feelings when you said that is not the same thing as you're wrong again. Actually, if someone were to say to me, what you said really hurt my feelings, there's really kind of three possibilities there. The first is that I did, that I was snarky, and I said something that was hurtful. The second is that the individual is carrying through life with them traumas that are triggered by the words of other people. Anybody here not have trauma? And the third is that I used language unskillfully, that in trying and working in fulfilling the dharma of teaching, instead of letting the language of the mother come through, I lowered it down a bit to the language of the human. You're all capable of the language of the mother. Every single one of us, without exception. We are capable of opening our mouth and having the sacred vibration of the mother come through. We're absolutely capable of that. We don't always have to relegate ourselves to the primal reaction when we can have a sacred response. But what has to get out of the way is the prideful ego. Questions yet? Or reflections yet? Concerns yet? Okay. So where do we begin? We begin the cultivation of humility by acknowledging that we're in our own way, that we take a lot of our time in the day to chase after things, to chase after what we think we're going to enjoy, to run away from what we think we won't, to acquire things. You know, there's a nice shiny object over here, I'm going to run over there and check that out. There's a nice shiny object over here, I'm going to run over there and check that out. And as we're running over here and over there, we also have a tendency to stumble and fall and scrape our knees and, be injured psychologically, emotionally, and physically along the way. Why does that happen? Because we don't even know where we're putting our feet. We don't know how fast we're running. Most of the time, we don't even know what we're running to. We're just going, and we're blind in the going. So we stop. We stop and we say, there's something quite interesting and appealing over here. I want to run over to that. Perhaps it's a really nice cup of coffee or a piece of chocolate cake or something along those lines. Whatever your little demon is, that's what's over here. So then you say to yourself, how do I approach this mindfully so that instead of being entangled in the chase, I am having an experience knowingly. So I'm not saying don't go over there. You're a human being. You're going to go wherever you want to go. What I'm saying is there's a difference in how you go there. Running blindly or being mindful and present on purpose. When you're mindful and present on purpose, you start to see more. You start to be present with more of what is actually going on. There's a beautiful blessing when you sit down to have a meal. It's a fairly long blessing. I won't do the whole thing, but it starts off with, I'm grateful for Mother Nature and the earth for growing these foods. And I'm grateful for the farmer and all the people who work with the farmer to cultivate these foods and to make them so that they grow healthy and they harvested them. And to the workers who brought them from the field to the truck and the drivers of the truck who brought them from the truck to the store, and the workers at the store who put them on the shelves, and on and on and on. I'm grateful for all these things. When we slow down, we have the opportunity to practice a more profound, inclusive gratitude. But when we're running, grabbing, taking, there's very little true gratitude there. It becomes just another thing that flies by the mind. Oh, I'm grateful for this, absolutely. But taking is not the same thing as gratitude. Grasping is not gratitude. Gratitude is a heartfelt, sincere reflection. It is a heartfelt, sincere sense of humbleness. So slow down wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, so that you can take more in as a witness. And over time, empower yourself to become more and more familiar with all the efforts, with all the work, and with all the mystery. Because how did that plant grow? How did that seed sprout? Yeah, there's a science, I know. But past the science, how is it possible that one little acorn has the power to produce a tree that can produce thousands of trees? How is that? If we're constantly running blindly, we do not have the time to sit down and truly reflect on that. Instead, we buy a t-shirt or a crystal or whatever, and we say, read the shirt. Read the shirt. And it's okay, t-shirts are fun. I love that t-shirt. Were you at the Dead Festival recently? They just had the last Dead Festival. Yeah, so what is it, Dead and Company? Yeah, they just did the last one. Michelle was there. And so your t-shirt reminded me of that. Yeah. So t-shirts can be fun and interesting, and they bring up memories and things for us, and they project thoughts and ideals. However, they're not the intention, the setting of the intention, nor the fulfillment of it. Somebody that I know had on a t-shirt from a concert. I don't know if it was like Taylor Swift or somebody like that. It was like some big person in music today. And I said, oh, did you go? And they were like, oh, no, I've never seen them live. But that's a tour t-shirt. Oh, yeah, no, I just like it because, I like their music. Like, okay. So the t-shirt doesn't always reflect the action, does it? No, it does not. So you need to be certain on your path that you're reflecting your own intention. Taking those ideas, those swiftly moving thoughts, and putting them into action for yourself. Put your humility into action so that you can take in the bigger picture of things and cultivate a deeper gratitude and presence in life. Where do we start? Okay, so cultivating humility, the first place to start is when you wake up in the morning. That's the first place to start. I've given you 2 pieces of paper. The shorter one that says Samudra Vasane on the top. Do you have papers, Tarini? Oh, okay. Yeah, so Samudra Vasane. When you wake up in the morning, you start to open your eyes and you yawn, stretch the arms. Oh, it's going to be a great day. And then you either jump out of bed or you say it's going to be a horrible day and you pull the covers back over your head. One or the other. Before you get out of bed, the cultivation of humility. When I get out of this bed, which was provided to me so lovingly by the Divine Mother, I'm going to put my feet on her. Because she is this earth. She is this universe. She is everything. I'm going to put my feet on her. If you went home to your loved one, your partner, your child, your friend, and just stepped on them, would they be slightly offended? The mother doesn't get easily offended. But would you feel kind of awkward doing that? Just like say, I'm going to step on you now, right? And I can pretty much guarantee that none of you actually do that, right? None of you actually step on other people, at least not physically. Well, we step on the Divine Mother all the time, and not once do we ever say, forgive me. We do not take ownership over the way we walk over her. Instead, we take her for granted. So let humility begin there. That when you wake up in the morning, the first thing that you do, you can leave this on your bedside, and then pick this up and say, Samudra Vasane Devi, Parvatashtana Mandale, Vishnupatni Namastubhyam, Padasparsham Kshama Swame. You can't read Sanskrit, that's okay. Mother Earth, with the oceans as your robes, the mountains as your bosom, my salutations to you, consort of Vishnu, forgive me as my feet step on you. And then a little side intention to go along with that. I will walk gently upon you, as gently as possible. I won't stomp my feet. I won't use my feet violently. I will walk gently upon you. Oh, boy, is that a start, right? Say after me. Samudra, Vasane, Devi, Parvatasta, Parvatastana, Mandale. I broke it in two parts because it's a long word. Parvatastana Mandale. Vishnupatni. Namastubhyam. Padasparsham. Kshama Swame. Yeah. Say after me, Mother Earth.
Mother Earth.
With the oceans as your robes. Mountains as your bosom. My salutations to you. Consort of Vishnu. Forgive me as my feet step on you. Powerful practice. Extremely powerful practice.
There's a recent story I came across about this older gentleman, like he's in his 70s or something crazy. He started running really late in life, and he has no problems, and he runs all these races, like long races. And he was interviewed, like, doesn't this hurt? Doesn't your body hurt? And he says, no, because every day I promise the earth that I will not hurt her. So she does not hurt me.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it really stuck with me.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
And then we think to ourselves, in our little prideful ego, either I could never do that. What's his secret? Or why do I need to do that? You know, we haven't cultivated the patience within ourselves to actually contemplate the power of that. One of my very beloved teachers, Nischala Joy Devi, love her so dearly. She was a sadhaka under Swami Satsang at the Satchidananda ashram, and had taken her monastic vows for quite a while in her life. And she would share this story. So, they would be walking through the fields as they were looking at the ashram grounds, envisioning what would be where. And she said, a devotee noticed that as Swamiji would walk, when he took the step, the grass under his foot at the last step was still straight up. Like, it wasn't crushed. the reeds of grass weren't bent over. And the devotee asked him, said, how is it that you can walk across the grass almost like you're not touching the grass? The grass there's no footprint there. And he said, that's how much I love the Divine Mother. That is the love that is shared between the Divine Mother and myself, is that I will not harm her. I will lay my foot gently down upon her. Now imagine that. Think about the last time that you walked through a room or through a field or into a store or into your home. The energy with which you walked there came from your feet. The energy with which you met people, came from your feet, the way you put your feet on the ground. Last time someone pissed you off, how did you reply to them? You walked heavily toward them to get into their face, to confront. It came from your feet. So if you change the way your feet relate to the earth herself, then you will change the basis of every relationship you have. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Give it a try. Give it a try. One of the other things people have a challenge with, I suppose is the right way to say it, is that when they are talking about this, when they're talking about the cultivation of humility, or they're listening to a conversation about the cultivation of humility and about the change that is possible to bring all of our relationships, all of our human-made relationships, into the realm of humility from our own side. Because you can't force someone else. I can only give you the paper and say, hey, this is a possibility, It's up to you to do it. You can't control what anybody else does. All you can do is cultivate the beauty of humility within your own self, and then have a sincere faith in the power of that humility, that it actually is doing something for you, that it no longer really impacts you what the other person chooses, because you understand that we're all in the midst of struggle, and they're in a different place with their struggle. They're working through their own details. And so you understand that whatever is being said, whatever's coming out of their mouth, is in the primal human realm. It's not in the sacred realm. Whatever they're saying is not an insult to you. It is an uncertainty within themselves because of the bondage, the entanglement that they themselves are in. And there's humility in accepting that. Absolutely, which is yet another level. So we have this very straightforward practice that we can do every morning when we wake up to moderate the impact that our feet have upon her, the earth, the mother. And then we can start taking humility to another level as our relationships change because of this very simple, straightforward practice, which is really not so simple, but And as we see our relationships changing, we can begin to explore why we react to people the way we do. Why we spend so much of the sacred voice that we have been given. Why we spend so much of that in defensiveness and offensiveness and offense and violence and reaction. Why do we not invest more? Would you put all of your money into a stock that you knew was going to fail? That you knew wasn't worth anything? That you knew was depleting? Who here would invest in that? Nobody. But that's exactly where our reactions take us to. Depletion of our energy. So why not start to invest in a more positive stock? I don't like the word positive, but I think you all know what I mean. Why don't, in a more energetically, uplifting Why don't we start investing our voice in the higher vibrations? And sometimes that starts with silence. Zip it. Sometimes it starts with mantra japa, chanting. Sometimes it starts with the inner voice saying, accept responsibility. Accept the responsibility. You're not free of responsibility, and it's okay. And then sometimes it projects outward in a way that can soothe the suffering, not only of one's own self, but a little bit of others as well. The words of kindness. Words that are no longer violent. Is this ringing true to some degree? Yeah? Good. Start with that first mantra, though. Start with that. And take 6 months or a year. Please take more than a week. And you know when it says 27 days is all it takes to create a new habit? I don't know about you. That's a good start. 27 days is a good start. But your past habits that you've been doing for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, they're a little stronger than 27 days. The way you walk into a room, you've cultivated that since you've been born. So that's a pretty powerful habit. I'll never forget when I first met my guru, 20 plus years ago, more than that. He said something in a talk one time. He said, you know, I guess somebody had come in. He was talking at a yoga studio in New Jersey, which was like on the 3rd floor. And there were 2 things that he said during this talk. The first was somebody was coming up the stairs, running up the stairs because they were late and they were trying to be, innocuous, and running up the stairs, pounding their feet. And they walked in and sat down, and he just kept talking. And he stopped, and he said, at the ashram, and he meant his ashram in India, because this wasn't here at that point. He said, at the ashram, I can always tell when a student is practicing a level of sincerity in their devotion, because whether they're walking or running, I won't hear them. Softness upon the earth. But when I hear the feet pounding, my heart starts pounding. Because I don't know who's coming in the room. I don't know if it's somebody coming in to yell at me. I don't know if it's a student who's anxious because they're late. I don't know if it's the office manager with an emergency. I don't know what it is. So my heart starts to pound. The heart starts to pound, concentration's interrupted. Concentration's interrupted. It's not fair to the students who came here to hear an uninterrupted flow of discourse. And that was like a big aha. And then he followed it up with, he looked at the student and he said, how many stairs did you just run up? And the student said, well, I don't know, a couple of dozen at least. He said, no, not a general. How many steps? How many steps did it take you to get from the bottom to the top? And the student was like, I don't know, I wasn't paying attention to that. And he looked at everybody in the room and he said, does anybody here know? And he went back to the person, he said, it's not just you. Does anybody here know how many steps from the bottom to the top? And everybody just sunk in their seat a little bit, including me. We all sunk in our seat a little bit. And he said, 37. May you all be so present as you walk through this world as to know what you're walking on, where you're walking to, every obstacle in your way, every opportunity. May you always know how many stairs there are. And the only way that you can know that is if you walk with humility. Powerful statement. Changed everything for me in that moment, because now as I'm going through the store, to go grocery shopping, something so mundane as like getting oat milk, well, back then it would have been almond milk, but and waiting in line for the cash register. And instead of sitting there and thinking to myself where I have to get to next, the shiny object over there, I sat there and I said, let me focus on my breath. Let me close my eyes and just kind of take in the surroundings. But not entangled. And as I did that more and more and more, and chant this in the morning more and more and more, all relationships started to change more and more and more. We have two ends of the spectrum. We have the beginning, well, really three. We have the beginning, we have the middle, which is however long the middle is, and then we have the ultimate. Your other piece of paper. Say after me. Sarva. Bhuteshu. Yenaikam. Bhavam. Avyayam. Ikshate. Avibhaktam. Vibhakteshu. Taj. Gyanam. Vidhi. Sattvikam. The knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities, though they are divided into innumerable forms, you should understand to be the mode of goodness. Understand that everything everywhere is the same exact divine consciousness. Whether it's you or me, the trees, the birds, the vegetables in the garden, the fish in the pond, the friend, the foe, the easy one, the difficult one, the challenge, the enjoyment, the obstacle, the clear path, the mountain, the valley, the ocean, the desert. It is all that same divinity. In the Bhagavad Gita, which this verse is from, the name is Krishna. In the Devi Mahatmya, it's the Divine Mother. Whatever it is called by you, know it to not be only that which is so far removed from you that you could never reach it. Stop telling yourself that. And instead, know that every day you're walking upon that, walking through that, walking with that, walking as that, in relationship always to that. And in essence, that. This verse, which comes in chapter 18, verse 20 of the Bhagavad Gita, so it's in the last chapter. Krishna says this in many different ways through the entire Bhagavad Gita. But in the last chapter, it's so very straightforward. We could add one little line after that if we wanted to. Not that I'm improving on Krishna, because you can't. But the little line would be for the sake of our human primal nature. Don't forget, in order to fully understand and embody this verse, you must cultivate humility. Otherwise, you're entangled in the idea, I have the right to stomp my feet, I have the right to tell you what I think. I have the right to use my human words however the hell I feel. I have the right to not really care about your reactions or responses. I have the right to shirk my responsibility. I'm not responsible. It's all you. We become so entangled in that this verse simply becomes a poem, a pretty possibility that we're interested to read, but not interested to experience. Or at least, maybe not interested. Well, no, not interested. Or we just don't think we're strong enough. We don't think we have what it takes. Or we're scared of it. Because if the first mantra didn't scare the bejesus out of you, the idea that the way you step your feet onto the earth when you wake up in the morning will change everything for you eventually, if that didn't scare you, then the mystery of 18.20 will certainly throw you into a tizzy in the human ego, the human mind. But they are the two ends of the spectrum. The beginning, understanding that something as mundane as your feet matter. And the ultimate, what waits for you, what waits for me, what waits for everything everywhere, is the realization, the knowing of unity. The experience of innermost peace. And the detanglement that leads to moksha, true liberation. That was a lot, but it was just a little. What thoughts or questions do you have? What reflections? Thomas?
Yeah, so when you were sharing about Swamiji and the steps, and that there are 37 steps, I was shown clearly that he wasn't counting steps. It was that he was listening, right, with his feet. So the listening with your feet, walking barefoot on the earth, or whatever, maybe barefoot isn't really essential, but to me there's this whisper, right? There's this sense of the whisper of the Divine Mother who is waiting for you to listen, in a sense, and that listening through your feet as you walk was what he was, what he was pointing to. And I really liked what you pointed to also about the food that we eat. That how many hands, touched, or were part of it arriving on your table, and that I think that's a similar thing, that every step we take can be with the divine presence of awareness, right? That we are aware of the grace that flows through all of it. Right here.
Exactly.
And I would say the godness, the mode of godness, goodness.
Yes. Thank you, Thomas. Beautiful. Anybody else like to reflect? Tarini?
Yeah, this is kind of building and looking at, this verse and the understanding of our undivided spiritual nature of all living beings as we act with entanglements and have a sense of entitlement with it, because they really do kind of go hand in hand. That we think we can just do and act, and our reactions don't impact. We actually continue to reinforce not only our own primal human nature and forgetting that divine, we feed into basically lowering that. So for me, this is coming together as someone who's constantly seeking and really trying to be in this mode of goodness and recognizing at times when I'm not, that I feel an inherent responsibility to myself and others to develop that humility and to be in that mode of goodness and to let go of these entanglements that bond me. Moments when the awareness is there feel beautiful, not because of anything I've cultivated around me, but what's happening inside.
Mm-hmm.
And the times that I don't, it's stepping back and going, okay, what happened there? And it's just interesting in realizing that that what I'm reflecting on is really feeling an just the responsibility to develop that humility,
Mm-hmm.
because we all have such divine capability. It's there.
Yeah.
So if I'm able to cultivate that more, then it will just happen around me. I don't want to feed that primal human reaction, even though I'm guilty of it and will do it, and I want to develop that. So yeah, thank you. This really,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Oh, you're so welcome. I wish I could take credit, but it's her, It's what happens when we open our mouth and let her speak is much different than when we open our mouth to speak, But I do just want to make one point, because I so deeply appreciate everything that you just shared, and that Thomas just shared, and everything that the mother shares, is to say that it's very normal that as an individual begins to explore the potential of this, the potential of humility, and the necessary vulnerability of the heart as a result. You can't really practice humility unless you're willing to be vulnerable, right? The vulnerability is over time what allows our faith to truly deepen, and the deeper knowing and understanding to awaken within us. But initially what ends up happening is that through that open-heartedness, we'll just call it, through that vulnerability to feel, to see, to hear, to witness, there is an immense grief. There's an immense grief that comes to us. It's almost an overwhelmedness. And we may find that we cry, that we feel such sorrow for the world and for the condition of all beings everywhere. And sometimes that will scare us. It will scare us because we've been told that spirituality is like sparkles and unicorns and stuff, And we're like, this ain't sparkles and unicorns. This isn't all feel-good stuff. No. Because when you're looking for the feel-good, it's the ego looking for justification of its attempts. It's saying, I want reward. When the grief comes, don't be entangled with it, because otherwise that becomes a reward too. Feel it, accept it, cry. Understand that what you're seeing is the human condition. Do not take ownership over it as if it were yours to complain about, yours to gossip about, yours to pity, yours to be superior over.
Or yours to feel guilty about.
Or yours to feel guilty about. Allow the grief to be there, but also allow the grief to move and fluctuate and change without becoming entangled with it, such that it takes root. Does that make some sense? Yeah. You can allow the weed to grow in the garden. You don't have to pull it out, and you also don't have to adorn it with bows and stuff, You could just leave it alone. The grief comes, you can be the same way. You don't have to pull it out from the root, and you don't have to be entangled by it. You don't have to decorate it and make it your display. You don't have to do anything to it. Because if you look at grief, and in some Ayurveda text, I don't remember which one right now, but it talks about how emotions are like divine beings visiting you. The reason why we look at them sometimes negatively is because we draw them down into the human state and say, guilt, grief, bad, anger, bad, frustration, bad, happy, good, pride, good, competition, good. We label them. And in labeling them, we extract their sacredness from them. If you know a little bit about the 24 principles of creation according to Sankhya Yoga, you know that what came from the void, from what we'll call the nothingness, but truly it's the existence of two potentialities that have not manifested yet. We have Purusha and Prakriti, what we call the divine masculine, divine feminine. Take that with a grain of salt. From there, the first thing that comes is the buddhi, the divine intellect. So there's an aspect of intellectualness, the discerning nature, which is sacred and meant only for the realization of I am, soham, I exist. From that comes the ahamkara. Ahamkara is the divine ego, divine ego. It's not the human ego. The human ego is mine, me, mine. The divine ego is, what am I? I exist. What am I? And the rest is the attempt to answer that. To always come into a fuller understanding of that. So there is an aspect of emotions which are part of that discovery of what exactly am I? That are divine. They've been given to you by the mother, of course they're divine. But then we pull them down into the human realm of opposites. And they lose their divine nature in our hearts and minds. They become only good or bad. Or neutral, not interesting. To treat them, not treat them, but to recognize within them their right to exist, lack of a better word, and also their innate right to freedom, moksha, liberation, is to say, grief has arrived, and I will sit here and be the witness to it. I will not bind it to me. I will not wrap it up in ropes and chains and keep it hostage. I will let it fluctuate and flow and move and change and shift and evolve and devolve and do whatever it's going to do like the clouds in the sky do. And I'll just simply bear witness to that. And if it's tears that have to fall, then it's tears. And if it's a little bit of anger that has to come out, or even a lot of anger that has to come out, then that's what it is. But you take ownership over those things because those are yours, you know. But the grief, that's not really the most eloquent way to say it. But I think you do, I'm fairly clear, correct? Okay, good. All right, I'll stop there because, you know. Any other questions or reflections right now? Yes.
So the difference between the conventional sense of humiliation, right? What the world teaches us, what humiliation is, and humility. Okay, it to me is guilt, that or condemnation, a sense of I am humiliated because I did something wrong and I deserve to be punished. You know,
right.
It's that judgment, right? That sense of judgment over the grief, right, or over the weed. You know, and that without that interpreter, without the interpretation of that teaching that we've all been taught, as children, usually.
Yeah, very early on.
Yeah, without that interpretation, then the weed is able to be the weed, or the grief is able to be the grief. And I almost feel like it's Velcro. Like, don't touch it, you know, from that place. Otherwise, it's just going to stick.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I just feel the sense of our pure innocence, you know, the sense of that's what I feel that the mother whispers whenever we walk gently upon her. You know, is our pure, unadulterated innocence that is the truth of who we are. Yeah. And then from that place, anything is a correction, and you know, an error is innocent.
Yeah.
It's easier to correct it,
Mm-hmm.
if it doesn't have that charge on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for letting me.
Did you want to say something?
Well, I mean, I have so many things that I would love to comment on, but I was just curious about your choice of the word grief and then your hesitation around it, just because my mother has recently passed and I'm noticing, thank you.
My condolences.
As I try my best to remain present and observe myself, observing all these waves of emotion, I'm really starting to doubt whether in my ability to articulate my own emotions, which is a challenge, especially in English, I find. I'm not sure that I know what grief is. I think it's a mixed bag of emotions that come wherever the wind blows, and something can set you off. When I feel the true sadness and loss that makes me weep, it's the same beauty that makes happiness. It's bliss. It's really what grief is to me.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was the complication that you were dancing around, or if I'm taking it in a different direction it wasn't supposed to go. It's just really interesting.
There's no direction that's not supposed to go. That's for first and foremost. Everything is on the table. So grief is a really complicated subject, and we just had a 2-day program that went through so much of that. But so when we experience, and this is trying to simplify something that is very complicated. On the one hand, when we are experiencing grief, when grief is upon us, as the Irish say, grief is upon me, then we will typically go one of maybe 3 ways, probably 1,000 ways, but we'll just do 3. The first way is the way of, I don't believe this could possibly happen. Why did this happen? It's a form of denial. And the denial makes the binds tighter. The second way is anger. Why did this have to happen? This isn't fair. Those make the binds tighter. The third is love. Grief is evidence of love. It's evidence that there was a shared love, or a longing for love, or a memory of love. And even when we are experiencing grief over the loss, and I'm not saying this is your situation, but in the event that anybody else has had the loss of a parent who they didn't feel loved them the way they needed to be loved, still the grief is the calling of love. So those are the 3 kind of generalizations that we can make about grief. The third one is the one that has the potential for freedom. It's the one that has the potential to loosen the binds versus tighten them. Because even though it can be intense and it can take your breath away and you can feel very heavy weight associated with this, it is the reminder of the power of love. And eventually that weight will lift, and what will result will be a gratitude for the experience of love, the experience of the closeness, of the intimacy of the relationship, the potential of the relationship. And in the event that it was with a parent who we felt did not provide us with the love that we thought we deserved in this life, that we should have as a child, then the weight has the potential to lift because of forgiveness, because of understanding, because of recognition and resolution, reconciliation with one's own feelings, and the empathy of acknowledging the sense of, I have gone through this life longing for this. And there's a sorrow there, but there's also an understanding that perhaps this person couldn't provide this to me for their own karmic reasons. It could be a very long conversation. Those are only 3 avenues, And we do also always, it's beneficial for us to also always remember that really no 2 of us experience grief the same. So we're trying to put into a box something that is much bigger than the box and much more diverse, because for every person who's in this room, grief hits you differently and for different reasons. Grief is with us, as we talked about in the program, every single day of your life. There is grief. And grief is not only over the loss of an individual. That is the one that we focus on the most because it's potentially the most powerful. But any loss brings about grief. Any disappointment, any sense of things not being the way that you had hoped they would be brings grief. So we are all grieving something in life. What are you grieving right now in your life?
My relationship with my oldest child.
Okay. Powerful. Yes. What are you grieving right now in your life?
Being alone.
Being alone. What are you grieving right now in your life?
I don't know.
What are you grieving?
Well, she went to a funeral yesterday.
Oh.
I guess.
A close friend.
Yeah.
Oh, my condolences. Yeah. What are you grieving right now in your life?
That I really wanted strawberry pie yesterday.
That's so
real
very
big
human
yes
of you.
right there.
So very much so. Yeah. What are you grieving in your life right now?
My dog's not going to be around much
Mm.
longer.
Okay. What are you grieving, Thomas?
How violently I walk upon the earth without knowing.
And can I?
Yes, you
throw something
can.
in there? Yesterday afternoon, when I got home, my husband just said to me, "We live in a bi-level, and he spends most of his time downstairs. I spend most of mine upstairs." But he made the comment to me, "Why have you been walking so heavy through the house? You sound like you've gained 50 pounds."
Wow.
Yeah, it was very interesting that came up today.
Wow. Ma's talking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ma's talking to all of you. So you see, grief is so very diverse. Yes, yes.
Oh, I just thought of something that I was grieving. I did go to a funeral, and I'm not grieving from that because the person passed away quite a long time ago. It was finally her memorial because, she passed away during COVID, and she was 90,
Oh.
and one of my Zumba students, and also the mother of a friend of mine. So, and then her husband just recently passed away. So they had a memorial for the 2 of them, the couple, and it was beautiful. But I wasn't grieving that because I had already went through grieving for that person. But something that I've been grieving lately, it doesn't have anything to do with a specific person, but just the pavement, buildings, and things that keep covering the earth. That I'm grieving. Things I keep seeing. Garages popping up, extra buildings. I mean, then our neighbors that have 3 people that live in their house need 4,000 square feet in their house. Then they need a pool and a pool house and a gazebo and all this other stuff that they just keep building on their property so they don't have any ground. And the man wants to mow so much, but he doesn't have anything to mow left. And he comes to our property and mows part of our property because, we have about 3 acres and we're just not like that. Like, we love the nature, we let the grass grow into weeds and things like that.
Yeah.
So when I go outside and I look around and I see, he needed another garage, he needed an addition, he needed that. It's like, wow. And it's changing so fast. It's just and then people putting up fences so the deer can't go anywhere. They go to art
Except in the
gallery.
street. Yeah,
It's terrible.
I know.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm grieving that right now, and that's been sort of in my psyche for a while.
Yeah.
That's something that I've been grieving.
So you see, we all, thank you so much for sharing that. See, we all grieve all different types of things. Grief is a very powerful energy, very, very powerful. And it's not something that we should just kind of push away or poo-poo or ignore. It's something that can really, remind us of the power of love, the power of unity. Because everything that every single one of you have said, and even with the strawberry pie, we have those feelings because in our humanness we care. Thank God we care. Could you imagine if we didn't? Right? Yeah. Thank you for that reflection.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else from anybody today? Are we good? Yeah. Let's sit tall and close the eyes. Draw your hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in one Om and the All Beings mantra. If you know, please join. Breathing in. Om. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om shanti shanti shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you all so much for being here today. Sending love with each and every one of you as you walk through the world. Both the world that you have created and the world that all others have created. For one single planet, there's a whole lot of worlds here. Yeah. Thank you all.